Hello, everyone. I'm Traci Arieli, end-of-life doula and founder of Comforting Closure. Welcome back to our podcast. Today, we're talking about something that can enrich every aspect of our lives, the power of ritual. In our fast-paced world, the art of ritual can seem like a forgotten treasure, a relic of the past. Yet, in moments of transition, grief, and even in our daily routines, rituals can serve as anchors, providing comfort, connection, and a pathway to healing. They weave the fabric of our relationships tighter and bring a sense of sacredness into the everyday. I'm thrilled to have Megan Sheldon from Be Ceremonial with us today. Megan's work in crafting meaningful rituals for individuals and communities has touched many seeking solace and connection in their lives. Today, she's here to share with us her wisdom on how rituals can guide us through life's transitions, enrich our relationships, and help us navigate the complexities of grief and loss. Megan, welcome, and thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate it.
Oh, thank you for having me. It's so wonderful to continue to have these conversations that we've started offline and now we get to share with so many more people. And I think we're both passionate about that.
Yes, yes. Can you tell our listeners about yourself and your journey to create Be Ceremonial and tell us about the app?
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things that there's a short version and there's a long version. So I'll try to find somewhere in between. My whole life, I have been drawn to death, dying, and grief. I've been curious about it. And yet, as you know, for many of us, we kind of, when that curiosity is piqued, especially as a child or a young adult, you realize that people aren't comfortable talking about this. And so you feel a little bit strange in having those conversations. And slowly by slowly, you stop. You stop having those talks with people. You stop bringing it up. Our culture, I'm here in Canada, I'm in North Vancouver, and like many cultures around the world, we are not very good about talking about the hard stuff. The year I was born, three of my grandparents died. So I've now realized that that shaped me. I was too little to know, but it shaped my entry into this world. It shaped the relationship I had with my mother and my father, who were grieving at the same time as, being so full of gratitude for this new baby. And as my life has gone on, I've always been drawn to storytelling. I'm a trained journalist, and I did a master's in cultural mythology in Scotland, in Edinburgh, where I got to trace my own lineage and my own kind of stories and ancestry and reconnect with my great-grandparents through that lens of mythological kind of connection. And then I came back to Canada and I kind of moved into a marketing world. I had a marketing company. While at the same time, my life started to take these twists and turns. I lost several friends. Several friends died in various reasons and various ways. And I didn't know how to grieve. There was, there might have been a funeral or a celebration of life, but that was about it. And I was left kind of wanting to talk about this so much more and not knowing how. And then my husband and I got married and we kind of looked at the wedding script and threw it out the window and decided to start from scratch. How do we want to get married? Not how does everybody else get married, but how can we create ritual and ceremony in a way that's meaningful to us? His father had just received a terminal diagnosis, so we knew that this would be the only time our two families would come together. I'm a natural convener and gatherer. I'm trained in something called the art of hosting and the circle way. So I knew that I could do this. I knew I could create a wedding ceremony from scratch that held space for the grief we were feeling, that held space for the gratitude and all of the values that we were stepping into as a young couple. So that was my first kind of entryway into really truly planning a ceremony from scratch. Shortly thereafter, we went through a few years of recurrent miscarriage and fertility challenges. And that, again, was these seemingly invisible moments that nobody knows how to support you, not only around a miscarriage, but also around the day you reach your due date and there's no baby. I was pregnant with several friends and their pregnancies continued on when mine didn't. So the moments that I felt were, you could barely breathe, you could barely find yourself, and yet you had to move forward, and very few people talked about them. And I thought, what if I tell my story? What if I, write about it? What if I share about it? I started hosting weekly tea in my living room for anybody who'd gone through pregnancy loss and trying to find a community where we could talk about these things. So as that kind of experience opened me up, it also connected me to people first in my community and then around the world. And I started to help them think about ritual and ceremony in new ways and throw out the script and throw out the kind of prescribed definition of what we might think it is, and instead think, what could it be? What do we need it to be today? And tomorrow might be different. So that was about 10 years ago. I started creating ceremonies on the side. It was never meant to be a profession. And then I learned about celebrants and end-of-life doulas. And so I took my training and I kind of put my foot in that water and swam around a little bit. And then the pandemic hit, and my husband, who is in tech, lost his job. And we decided to find a way to make all of these things that I'd been learning and experiencing and opening up, both in myself and in others, available. So we started to create this choose your own ritual adventure experience, which is now Be Ceremonial. And yeah, it's been 3 years of just beautiful, slow growth. I was saying to you earlier that so much of this world is about fast. How do you get there? How do you get a bigger audience, get wider, reach your limbs further? And my question is, how do we stay exactly where we are and deepen our roots? How do I use my root system, the whole world that lies just beneath the surface, to support others and have this slow, intentional growth that I think we often miss out on in our society these days?
Yeah, I love that. That is, thank you for sharing that journey with us. Yeah, that was, thank you. Um, so Be Ceremonial is an app that people, and it's a website also where people can go and create their own rituals. And you also have rituals that they can take advantage of, and templates and all of that. Yeah. And everything so that they could really bring that into their daily lives.
Yeah. And so I think the first place that I'll start, um, just for everybody who's listening, is to offer you my definition of ritual and ceremony. And my hope with this is not for you to have to feel like you take the exact same one. I talk to people all the time and they have different definitions. And I think there's so much beauty in that. There is an important place in this world for traditional ancestral rituals that are passed down across culture. There is a really important need for us, especially myself as a white settler, to not appropriate from other cultures and take rituals that are not mine. And there's this wonderful other world where we get to invent and create and be artistic and find rituals that are meaningful to things that we're facing now that humanity has never had to face before. So we have to come up with new rituals. So that's the space that I like to play in. It's kind of this taking this ancient algorithm and then bringing in this modern creativity. And I've studied, I'm a researcher, so I've studied the traditional rite of passage, and it follows these kind of three main frameworks of separating from what was, kind of, stepping away from what you were or where you've been, and the middle ground of being present and acknowledging kind of this liminal space, and then thinking about what you're going to do to incorporate what you've learned moving forward. So we've taken that framework, and that's how we have built Be Ceremonial, with this idea of acknowledging what was, what is, and what will be. And for me, a ritual can be a standalone thing. It can be the way you wake up in the morning, the way you go to bed at night, the way you address your anger, the way you kind of create a grief ritual. And it usually is something it starts with intention. So I think about a ritual being an intentional, symbolic action that hopes to create meaning. It doesn't always. I say all the time, the best advice I can give people is to try, and it might fail, it might flop. It has for me many times, but in that trying, in that exploration and that curiosity, we get to realize that, oh, this ritual actually did bring me meaning, and I'm going to now repeat it, or I'm going to bring it into my life in a new way. So the intentionality of a ritual is the number one place to start. We don't just fall into a ritual. I say that we fall into routine. Waking up and having your morning coffee the same way every day is not a ritual. But if you are intentional about what you're doing, what you're connecting with as you wake up and as you have your morning coffee, maybe your dad made coffee a certain way when you were growing up, and he died many years ago. And so you take that opportunity to wake up, and as the beans are grinding and as the water's boiling and as you do your pour into the cup and take your first sip, maybe you think about your dad. And maybe you take that moment to create a little bit of space for the grief that you're feeling, and also the gratitude and whatever other complex emotions that we live with as human beings. And as you sip your coffee, you hold space for that. You've now elevated that routine, that habit into the realm of ritual. So that can be a ritual. When you take a series of rituals and string them together, for me, that's a ceremony. That's finding a ritual that helps you acknowledge what was, finding a ritual that helps you release the past or honor the past, finding a ritual that helps you be present and in the moment and just completely still. And then thinking about a ritual that you're going to carry forward. Maybe it's around legacy keeping, maybe it's around intention setting or manifesting. Suddenly, you've got this framework that is the ceremony, and you can do it on your own, you can do it in a community setting. Ceremonies tend to follow kind of larger rites of passage. We most of us know ceremony around birth, marriage, and death, but there are so many other points along the human journey that deserve ceremony. They deserve that recognition and that acknowledgement. And that's what I'm really interested in.
So I have two questions I just thought about. One, do you have and like who has influenced you? You've gone to school for this. You've studied mythology. Do you have any particular person that has influenced you that you know, or maybe that you've just studied?
Yeah, it's interesting because in my celebrant training, a lot of the kind of academic frameworks are men. So I was definitely early on influenced by men. I was a big fan of Joseph Campbell, and that was kind of my mythology degree and looking at rites of passage and looking at storytelling and archetype and myth and all of that. There's a phenomenal ritualist who's Canadian and he's still alive. His name is Ronald Grimes, and he's written some wonderful books that look at this kind of the alchemy and the structure of ritual across cultures around the world. And then there's the space that for me is the more modern, inventive, creative space where I get influenced by women like Priya Parker, who wrote the book The Art of Gathering, and Frances Weller, The Wild Edge of Sorrow, and the role of ritual in our grief journey. So I am influenced by them for sure, but I will be honest, the people that I'm most influenced by are the people that I get to meet and create ceremony for, and to see the transformation that happens as they think they can't do this. This is something that feels too weird, too hard, too silly, whatever it is. And then they step into that ceremonial space and they have their own transformative experience, and I get to learn from them. And I've created ceremonies for organ transplant recipients. I've created ceremonies for, families facing. I've created ceremonies for families facing. I can't say that. I've created ceremonies for families facing dementia and how we look at the dementia journey. And, a daughter reached out and she was about to see her mom for the first time since her mom forgot who she was. And she wanted a ceremony to acknowledge and mourn the relationship they had, while also setting an intention of creating a new relationship for them moving forward. So that's my biggest influence is day-to-day folks who don't think they can do this or they don't know where to start, and then helping them kind of step across that threshold into this space and giving them the tools and the structure. I mean, the Be Ceremonial is it's not a template. We're not here to tell you exactly what to do. We're here to give you a bunch of ideas and a bunch of frameworks and a bunch of inspiration. Number one, it's about storytelling. So people share back their stories, and then it gives you permission to be curious and creative and create what you need.
You talked about coffee and having that sort of ritual. I'm curious. I have my morning ritual, which I'll talk about, but I'm curious about your morning ritual. Then I'll share out mine. Do you have a morning ritual? You might not. That's okay.
I have small children, and I had small children during the pandemic, and everything went out the window. And I think for me, as a recovering perfectionist, I had to give myself permission to not have to think about a morning ritual as something I did every day at the exact same time because I was failing. If I had that rigid structure of what I thought my morning ritual was, and I did used to have one, now I have slivers of time, as my dear friend Kate Love taught me. So it might not be in the morning, it might be at 2 in the afternoon, but I will go outside and I will sit in the sunlight and I will just, bask in that warmth of the fire and the sun and the heat. I cold plunge in the ocean. So I ocean swim year round. Every Sunday morning, I host a ceremony. So anybody is welcome to come and join us on the beach. And at least 2 or 3 other times in the week, I'll do it as well. But it's a ceremony. We gather on the beach, and it's usually women. Men are welcome, and we have had a few, but for the most part, it's women. And for the most part, it's women who are in care providing roles. They might be death doulas, they might be palliative care nurses or hospice volunteers, but they also might be mothers, they might be teachers, they might be counselors. They're holding space for others. And so we gather on the beach and we find I invite everybody to take a few minutes to wander the beach and think about what they're grieving. It doesn't have to be about death and dying. Maybe they're grieving the loss of a friendship, or they're grieving the fact that their child is graduating high school, or they're grieving a death that they witnessed a few months ago and they still haven't properly mourned. So I invite them all to think about what they're grieving and find an object on the beach that reflects that or symbolically attaches them to that, and to infuse their grief into that rock or that shell or that handful of sand. And then we gather in a circle and we share. And for just 10, 15 seconds each, we go around and just share what we're grieving. We hold space. We're not there to fix it. We're not there to kind of solve it for each other. We're just acknowledging and validating that grief is present. And then we take that object and we throw it in the ocean, kind of releasing its hold over us. And then we step into the frigid, cold Pacific Ocean and howl and move and laugh and scream and dunk and plunge and whatever it is. Again, we're not, following a certain kind of breath technique, as a lot of people are in this movement. It's very primal. It's very much fluid. Follow your own needs. Some people just put their ankles in and that's enough. Some people like myself go out and just splash around and swim and howl and feel connected to nature and to myself. And then we come back out of the water and we warm up and we share what we're going to carry with us for the rest of the day or the rest of the week. Maybe we realize something, maybe we notice something, maybe we feel this intense gratitude for whatever it was that we experienced. So we just share that and then we go home, and it takes less than an hour every Sunday, but it's been a beautiful weekly ritual in my life.
That sounds wonderful. It actually sounds amazing. I mean, I live in California, in Northern California, or the San Francisco area, and I know how cold the water is. I could only imagine how cold the water is up where you're at. So that's it sounds really moving and really wonderful. So if I'm ever in your neck of the woods, I'm joining you on that. My ritual is I get up and I set an intention and I meditate, and after I take and I pull a card. I have some oracle decks and I really look at it and think about what it means to me in my life right now, and I journal about it. And that's a way for me to release whatever I'm going through, whatever I'm holding, and to really invite all the good that should happen in the day. So I really try to open it. It helps me open up a bit.
I love that. Yeah. I do a retreat every January that I offer, and every year we create a vision board of some kind. And this year, through the beautiful guidance of a dear friend of mine, Kate Shepard, who's an artist and fellow podcaster, and she encouraged me to think about what we were doing differently. And we invited everybody to create this big, beautiful vision board, and she guided us through the artistic kind of painting of it. And then late at night, that Saturday night, she and I took the 25 vision boards of these women who had set their intentions for the year, and we cut them into pieces, into 36 pieces. And then we wrapped them up in this beautiful hand-dyed scarf that she had made. And they woke up Sunday morning to their vision board, and they knew something was going to happen. They didn't know what, but they did give us permission to alter it. And then suddenly they had this vision board that was giant and huge, and it was now cut into pieces randomly, and they would open it up and they had their own vision deck, their own little oracle deck. So I have mine, and I don't get to do it every morning because mornings are chaos with school and all of that. But sometime during the day, I'll try and sit on my special chair and I'll open up my vision deck for 2024 and I'll pull a card. And when I put it on the vision board in January, I think I meant for it to mean one thing, but now that it's cut up, there might be a picture and it's been spliced in two. And now the word has been, divided, or the image has been divided. And now it means something different. And I have to kind of sit with that and reflect on that. So I love that idea of being kind of surprised by things.
That's amazing. That's amazing. So I just told you about my daily ritual. You have weekly rituals. How can people incorporate ritual into their daily life, small rituals into their routine to give them a sense of this peace and connection without feeling overwhelmed? Do you
Yeah.
have any guidance?
Yeah, so Be Ceremonial is three things. The first part is it's about daily rituals. And these are things that take 5 minutes or less. They shouldn't require a lot of planning or a lot of you know, purchasing of things and items and all of that. I'm really a big believer in looking around you and using what you have. I'm blessed to live in a Pacific Northwest rainforest with the ocean nearby, so I have lots of, nature inspired ritual tools, and my house is full of rocks and shells and but there's 72 different rituals in the app that kind of give you an idea on, here are 6 rituals that you can address your anger with. And I think for women especially, we don't always know how to express anger because it's never really felt safe for us. And we've been told not to be angry. And yet anger is a completely valid and valuable emotion if we can express it in ways that feel right to us. There's different grief rituals, there's healing rituals, there's rituals around burnout, and there's rituals around bedtime and morning. One of my favorite rituals in the app is a two-sided coin ritual. And I've got these all over my house. And I invite people just to take a piece of paper, cut it in a circle, or take a big rock. I've got these kind of wooden ones that I love. And just to think about 2 things that you're holding right now. Just check in with yourself and think about 2 things that you're holding that seem in tension with each other. They seem like polar opposites. You're not quite sure how to hold both at once. And this is especially true in our grief response, right? If your loved one dies or has been diagnosed with, something scary, and then you laugh that day, you feel so guilty. You think, oh, like I shouldn't feel happy. Like I'm dealing with so much grief. There's no space for both. And yet the human experience is meant to hold these polarities. We're meant to hold complex emotions at once. I think the pursuit of happiness that's taken over, especially in Western kind of existence, has really harmed us. We're not meant to be happy all the time, and we can be happy and sorrowful and, angry and fearful and frustrated at the same time. So I do this with my children. They're 6 and 8, and they've got their own little coins. I've got them all over the house with different words. But one day I might like this one right now. I did it the other day, and I felt like I was really holding a lot of tension between myself and others. So I held what I needed for myself in my left hand, and I kind of breathed it in. And the app kind of guides you through it if you want, but you also can kind of go on your own way. But just really picture it. What are you holding in connection to yourself right now? And then you flip it over and then you think about what you're holding in connection to others. And you might feel that one feels heavier, one feels darker, one feels, like there's not enough space for it. And so the ritual is just to allow both to exist. And then the final part of the ritual is to bring your hands together and hold both at once. And this kind of idea of the cognitive dissonance, the idea that we can't hold 2 opposing things at once, I think is what we're trying to really debunk, because we can hold grief and gratitude in the very same breath. We can hold fear and trust at the same time. I mean, that's part of why we're so, magical in this world, because we get to have that complex experience. So one of my favorite things in a ceremony is to invite people to hold space for those polar opposites, those tension opposing things, and invite, like I did at our wedding, right? People were very uncomfortable with the fact that I wanted to create a grief ritual at a wedding. And yet it worked beautifully because it was there already. I was just drawing attention to it.
I love how you just said, we're the magical beings. And I think that, or I feel that taking and bringing ritual into the daily life or your weekly life is bringing that magic, I think, that we lost in our daily society because we're moving so fast. And I think, yeah, a long time ago, we did have that magic. And yes, it wasn't science, and it wasn't, but we lost something when we really, when we want to uh, set something up in science or set something up as technology, while all this imagination is not seen as being important in our work that we do. So I really appreciate that.
Yeah, and there's a few things there. We became an individualistic culture, right? The pursuit of self became, that's why I was holding the tension with self and others, is because this idea of self-care, like take care of yourself, worry about your own little family. It means that we forget about our village, we forget about our community, we forget about how to support others. And so trying to find a balance there. The other thing too, it's not just technology. I mean, religion and institutional kind of powers took over a lot of ritual and ceremony. I know here in Canada, Indigenous cultures, it was illegal for them to perform their rituals and ceremonies. There was, punishment by jail if they were seen practicing their ritual and their ceremony. And so we have harmed ourselves and we have harmed others by thinking about ritual and ceremony in this black and white kind of world. And I think for many of us, we feel that gaping wound and we're trying to heal ourselves by bringing back the communal village mentality, by bringing back the idea that we can grieve and we will grieve forever. Grief is not something that goes through 5 stages and then it's over with. Like we are grieving beings just the same way that we are loving beings. We're angry, we're frustrated, like all of these things at once. So I know for myself, I don't identify as religious. I'm a humanist. For a long time, I didn't think I got to have ritual and ceremony because it was either behind a cultural door or behind an institutional wall. And so I just thought, oh, that's too bad. Like, and I was always was envious of my Jewish friends and all the beautiful rituals they had, but I really didn't, belong there. And so I felt like I got nothing. And then I started to reimagine ritual in my life. And I realized that the way my family had Sunday morning pancakes every week growing up, that was our family ritual. That was intentional. That was the space that we created. When the pandemic hit, my dad would make waffle batter and berries and whipped cream and drop it off at my brother's and my doorstep so that we could all partake in this family ritual, even if we couldn't be physically together. So the pandemic, I think, forced us to reimagine the rituals that we thought we needed and start to think about what is it that we actually need right now in this day and age.
Okay, so I'm going to bring it back to science, which is what I was getting away from. I know with meditation for a long time, people just thought it was fluff. And then science came around and said, this really does have physical benefits and mental benefits. Is there any studies on ritual and how it affects emotional health and physical health, or is it just mainly that spiritual practice that we have through ritual?
So in my master's in mythology, we learned about the idea of logos and mythos. And mythos, the myth, the world, is kind of like the right brain. It's this idea of make believe and wonder and magic and things that cannot be proven and should not be proven. And there's logos, which is the science, the practicality, the things that are proven. And I think the challenge with any society is when you hold one above the other. We need both pillars. We need to live in a world where at times we move into the logos framework and we try to prove things and we say, okay, my weekly swims that I do, they're lowering my blood pressure and they're doing this and they're, the cold water mental health benefits are huge. Yes. And there's something mythos worldly, otherworldly about it. When we swim in the sea with others and we share our grief, we can't define that. We can't put a research study into that. So for me, I try to live with the balance of both. There is a lot of research right now looking at the mental health benefits of ritual, mostly from an acknowledgement and a grief perspective. So when we acknowledge our grief on an ongoing basis, we build these muscles. So we build these ritual muscles. So you think about your morning ritual every morning, getting up, writing down things that you're holding, things that you're wanting more of in your life. When something big or hard or complicated happens, you already have those ritual muscles built up. So you are able to then think, okay, this is still hard. You've been given a cancer diagnosis, or a loved one dies, or you get fired from your job, whatever it is that happens. If you have that practice built up, of course, you're going to be able to maneuver yourself through that bigger experience in a more easeful way because you've been intentionally kind of building those muscles. So I do look to the science, and I look to the magic, and I find a balance in between.
How can individuals tailor their rituals to meet their personal needs, or or the unique dynamics of their relationships?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think that that's the magic. If you just take a prescribed ceremony and just follow it from A to Z and miss out on injecting yourself into it and the complicated nature of the human experience. I work with a lot of families at the end of the life, as you do, and there's family dynamics. There's dysfunctional family, right? A loved one dies and everybody is sad, but there's also kind of relief, or there's joy, or there's, unresolved words that were never spoken or words that were spoken and you're now left reeling from. So for me, the idea comes back to, again, kind of holding space for those polarities and thinking about ritual not as something that you have to follow exactly, but thinking of it as a framework that creates the space for you to bring to the surface whatever it is you're feeling. And again, the ritual is an intentional symbolic action with the hope of creating meaning. So what are you going to do? Like in that moment, I remember I did a funeral for a young man who had died. And in my earlier conversations with friends and family, I always talk to people and gather stories. As the journalist in me, I try to find all the threads and then we weave them together into the ceremonial framework. And then I leave room for the magic to happen. I kind of come to the table with a vague idea of what might happen over the next few hours. And I also leave room for the unexpected and that magic that happens when you gather people. And I talked with the mother ahead of time and I had her permission to try this, and I didn't know how it was going to work. Honestly, I was prepared for it to fail. But in the midst of the ceremony, I invited everybody to stand up. And this was a bunch of, big burly men that work in HVAC. And this was new for them. You could see them kind of looking around. And I said, I want you to imagine that this young man, who I was told gave the best hugs in the world. Everybody kept talking about how he would give this hug that was just big and full bodied, and he would hold you a little bit longer than you were comfortable with. I said, I want you all to imagine that he's here right now and that he's giving you a hug, and wrap your arms around yourself or around the person next to you or around in a group and take a few moments to pause and feel that hug and just feel the impact that his life has made on yours. And I kind of left it at that. And I stood back, and you can see people just kind of awkwardly like, what is this woman doing? What is she making me do? This feels weird. But slowly by slowly, people kind of hugged themselves and then hugged each other. And then groups got together, and the tears came and the laughter came and the hugs got tighter and the breath kind of slowed. And you could feel 150 people suddenly stepping into that ritual pause, where now we were doing what we were meant to do at this day. We were feeling the grief, we were feeling the whole, we were feeling the love, we were feeling the legacy, we were feeling all of it. And it was 2 minutes, but it changed the course of that day. It changed the course of the ceremony because we tapped into that communal grief that we were all holding. And I gave them something to do to express that grief.
Just got chills.
Mm.
Thank you. What advice would you give someone totally new to the ritual world who wants to create and start their own ritual? Where do they begin?
Well, I mean, you begin with Be Ceremonial. That's a great place. There's hundreds of rituals in the app. So we've got the daily rituals. We've also got life cycle ceremonies that span from like fertility and pregnancy loss and birth all the way through to, coming of age and weddings and divorce ceremonies and organ transplants, all the way into end of life. I'm doing a lot of work these days with living funerals and medical assistance in dying and death anniversaries. My advice to people is to a few things. There are no rules here. There's no rules. I think that's what the fun thing of like, you can repeat a ceremony as many times as you want. I do a lot of do-overs. Somebody will come to me and said, I did my mom's funeral 5 years ago and I'm still grieving. I don't feel like I did that funeral right. Can I do it again? Yes, you can. We can, of course, you can have 3 different funerals in the span of a week for different groups of people. I think people think they need to stick within a very rough, kind of confined space of what the ceremony can be. And I invite people to think outside of that. A funeral does not need to be at a church or at a community center. You can have a walk every day of the week that week, and each time invite different groups of people and go on a ritual walk as part of that funeral. And the funeral can take 7 days and it can look different for each group. There are so many invisible moments that we fail to recognize in our Western culture. I think about my friends that had trouble with infertility. I've had friends who have now closed the door to motherhood and never became a mom, and I've helped them create ceremonies to acknowledge that moment. I've had friends that have turned the age their mother was when their mother died. How do you create a ceremony to turn that age? You knew that age. It's been like a sharp kind of shard of glass in your mind this whole time, but nobody else around you knows about it. So how can you kind of arm yourself to face that day with ritual, with ceremony? Who can you invite to help you hold that space as you then become one day older than your mom ever got to live? So I invite people to not just think about ceremony at the kind of the regular times in life, a graduation or a wedding, or a funeral, but to think about all the invisible moments in between that are so impactful. The end of a friendship, when a friendship is truly over, what can you do to honor that friendship, both to thank it for what it brought you and also to kind of let go of what you no longer need in your life? I think the more that we can think about ceremony in those less visible spaces and breathe some light and life into those moments, then we do our own healing.
Thank you. I think that people, especially that funeral example that you gave, I work with a lot of clients, and the funeral or the celebration of life, the memorial, is so much pressure to them because they feel like it is the last time that they're going to commune with their loved one. And that, boom, that's it. So there's a lot of pressure, and those family dynamics come out. But sharing that, hey, it's not the only time that you could have a ceremony. It's not the only time that you could have a funeral or a memorial. You could have one every single year. You could have one every single month. You could do what you feel is right. There is no right or wrong to this. It is very helpful to people who are listening to this, and just helpful in general.
Yeah, and I think so many of us are just wanting to, especially when it comes to death and dying, we're just wanting to know how to carry forward. How do we move forward with that person in our lives, even if they're not here? And we just had my husband's father, my father-in-law's 7-year death anniversary, and we made his favorite meal, and we sat around. My daughters never got to meet him, but they talk about him constantly. And this day was an intentional day where we were sharing stories and we were talking about the things that he did with his life and the things he taught Johan, and where things about his life that we might not share with him on a more regular basis. We were intentional that day to really invite him into our family. And so I think finding ways to use ritual as that small little prompt to talk about people, even if they're no longer here, especially if they're no longer here, is just such a beautiful example of how ritual can help heal us.
What are some of the challenges that you find that people who are new to creating rituals, what are those challenges that you see time and time and again? And what is your advice for people to kind of get over those humps?
Yeah, so I've done a lot of training. So I've, had probably about 1,000 people come through my training in some shape or form. And I would say 75% of them come to me and they say, I don't have any ritual in my life. And that's kind of a statement. And I just kind of smile and I say, just you wait. You'll realize by the end of this course that you already have ritual in your life. I am not here to teach you how to do it. I'm here to help you remember. I'm here to help you reconnect with the things that are innate in us. And I know that to be true because I see it in children. Children are naturally ceremonial. They do not need much guidance, much prompts. They simply need the invitation to step across that threshold into that ceremonial container, into that sacred space. And then they do their thing. It's phenomenal. I lie every time I see children being given permission to kind of step into that ceremonial space and make it their own. I'm in awe because they come up with such beautiful rituals of reflection, of connection. So that one for sure is people thinking that they don't have it in their lives and that they're trying to learn. And I just have to kind of invite them to pause and look back like I did with my Sunday morning pancakes. Like I was raised in a house full of ritual. I was. But I had to unpack my own baggage and realize what I thought ritual was, what I thought ceremony was, is no longer serving me. So I have to kind of throw out one definition and find a way to define it for myself that's meaningful to me. And how you define it and how somebody else defines it, it's going to be different, and that's okay. There's so much room for us to define it in our own special way. If you were raised religious and you're still a little bit religious, but you're not quite sure, a lot of people have a lot of ideas of what they were raised with ritual, and now that doesn't quite fit in their life, so they're struggling. And I think just get really clear on the intention. Why are you doing this ritual? What is it? What is its purpose? Why is it needed? And if you get clear on that intention, the rest seems to fall into place.
How do rituals help in leaving a legacy, or in leaving a legacy? Can it help with that?
Yeah, legacy work is one of my favorite pieces of work. I'm holding a retreat in about 3 weeks that's focused all on living our legacy, because I think that we can define we are defining our legacy every day, but we don't always kind of pinpoint it. We don't step into it. We think our legacy will be defined after we die, and then the onerous part on those that are left behind, they're trying to think about all the ways to carry it forward. So for me, legacy is it's so complex, and it's also so simple. It's this idea of where's a special place that you hold in your heart that somebody could go to connect with you after you die? What's a song that brings you joy or fills your heart up with a certain emotion? And how can you share that song with somebody else? What has brought you the most joy and the most value in your life? And it's so interesting. I know there's a lot of books that out there that talk about the five main things the five main regrets of people that are dying and the things that they wish for in their life. And it's rarely around, wanting to get another promotion or the corner office. Like, it always comes back to relationships. I wish I'd spent more time with my loved ones. I wish I'd nurtured my friendships more. I wish I'd traveled and seen the world with this person. So I think relationships is the key. The more that we can really think about our legacy in terms of our relationships and share with people that gratitude. The idea of a living funeral is probably my favorite thing right now to do, to bring people together at the end of somebody's life and have them witness their legacy, to hear it being shared through the stories, to hear it, being felt, or to feel it through the hugs, to be able to be at that location and be surrounded by so much love and impact, and know that their legacy will continue on after they die, that these stories will continue to be told. That brings me so much peace, because I think that's what the fear is for a lot of people, is that they'll be forgotten. That it won't matter. And so finding ways to just show ourselves that our lives matter, and that our legacy is already here, is just a really reassuring thing for people who might have a lot of fear around death and dying.
I hate to say or use the word trend, but do you foresee in the future that people will be going back more and more to ritual, creating their rituals that become part of our culture?
I hope, there is definitely, as there is a rise right now in the death doula movement and the community death care. I think more so than ever, our systems that have been built up and our culture are clashing, right? The culture that is rising up is begging for more connection, more, slowing things down, the meditation movement, all of this. And yet our systems are all about fast and growth and things that are contained in that logos world, right? Everything, it just needs to be proven. And so I think there is this kind of clash happening, and people are craving more ritual and more ceremony in their lives, for sure. I mean, we see that. And yet I think also people are uncertain as to what that means, and how to start, and how it's going to shift things. So I think the trend will hopefully continue in the sense of getting people to ask questions, to share stories. The rise of vulnerability. I love Brene Brown and her belief that vulnerability begets vulnerability. Me sharing my story about my recurrent miscarriages 10, 12 years ago, and then having, somebody that I went to grade 3 with reaching out and saying, "Oh, I read your story. I just wanted to share. I've been going through something similar." It made me feel so much less alone to know that you were doing that. Can you share with me what you did for your ceremony? I would love to do something for myself. And then I, of course, reached out and helped her create her own ceremony. That permission to not have to kind of keep our grief and the things that are feel sometimes shameful or guilty or ugly, to keep those behind closed doors, and instead to open that up and say, life is not perfect, life is hard, here's what I'm going through right now. The more we can normalize those types of conversations, I think the less alone all of us feel, because it happens every time. I know I worked with a group of women who had chosen not to have children or could not have children. And when I offered the idea of creating a ritual or a ceremony to kind of close that door, you could see all of them saying, "Oh, I didn't know that was possible. I didn't know," a lot of them said, I spent all the last 10 years going to baby showers and weddings and all of that. And I felt like I was never going to get my time where I got to be honored and celebrated by my community. And I said, well, let's create that. Let's create a ceremony to honor who you are now and the decisions that have been made or the circumstances that have made this so. And let's create that ceremonial time for you. And I think that gives people a lot of hope to know that they're not missing out on something if they don't follow a prescribed path.
So I know your offerings, you have offerings for individuals to come on and create, help, train them to create their rituals. And do you have something similar for people who are in the helping fields so that they could help the people that they're helping?
Yeah, so we started that way. We started as kind of a support platform for care providers, and quickly realized that care providers are so burnt out. Asking them to take on one more thing was just feeling quite onerous and quite tricky for them. And at the same time, we had so many people that weren't care providers coming and saying, oh, like I want to create a birth closing ceremony, but I don't want to hire somebody for it. Or, I'm a celebrant. So people do hire me for one-on-one work. And I love that. So we're not trying to replace celebrants. We're trying to give people tools and techniques that they can weave into their everyday life. And there's something magical about hiring a celebrant or a ceremony guide to take you through a big rite of passage. And there's something equally empowering about being able to do it yourself and to realize that you're coming up on a death anniversary or a supposed due date or, a tricky kind of moment, and you have those muscles built up. So yeah, people can create their own rituals within the app. They can create ceremonies for themselves. There's also the ability in the app to gift a ceremony. This came from what I wished I'd had. If somebody, 12 years ago had gifted me a little ceremony to honor my miscarriage, it would have changed so much. I would have felt like my grief was valid and I would have felt supported. And, people dropping food off was lovely, but it wasn't tapping into that need that I had to feel like this happened, this was real. The medical system downplayed it so much. So you can gift a ceremony as part of your membership. We also have an online community that you get to join and ask others. I'm a big believer in we are all experts. We all hold wisdom. We all hold story. So I'm not here to just to be the one that has all the answers. I believe in the community power. So you join our online community. Somebody reached out recently and said that a friend of theirs was about to have a mastectomy, and they were wondering if people had any rituals that could support her. And right away, the community, the village chimed in and said, when my friend had a mastectomy, this is what I did, or when I had one, this is what I did. And again, it's not to tell them what to do, it's just to give them ideas. It's to open that door. And then we're pre-recording a lot of our workshops and putting them into the app. So we're turning the app into a great learning space. So there's workshops, there's ceremony interviews with some of my mentors. So I just released one yesterday with Hope Edelman, who started the Motherless Daughters movement in the US. And she talks all about rituals to acknowledge those silent thresholds, like turning the age that you were when your mother died, or turning the age that your mother was when she died, and how do you cross that silent threshold. So we'll continue to share different learning tools within our platform to kind of move into that logos mindset, and also thinking about the magical mythos of, here's a bunch of rituals, take the ingredients that you like, mix them into a bowl, and the alchemy and the magic will come from that. So that's one of the beautiful things, is to know that all, 100 people in a room could take the exact same 5 rituals, and all of our ceremonies should be different. They should all tell our stories and, reflect our lived experiences. And that for me is where the magic lies.
Great. So this is our last question. What message would you like to leave our listeners with about the power of ritual in their lives?
I would like to invite people to talk about it, to ask questions, to get curious. The next time you're at your school drop off and you're talking to somebody about, something that you're going through in life, be vulnerable. Ask them, what did you do? What did you do when your oldest, graduated high school and moved out of the home and you found yourself alone? Or share stories. I think that so much of this is about curiosity and hearing from others what they might have done can offer you that inspiration. And it also shows you that you're not so alone, that a lot of us are seeking this meaning, this ceremony in our lives in different ways. And there's so much transformative power in it. And it all begins with being vulnerable and stepping into that space of the unknown. And it's not going to be a straightforward path. It's going to be a bit of a windy journey. But I do believe that it will get you closer to yourself and to who you truly are.
Thank you, Megan. Can't thank you enough for being here today and sharing all of your wisdom and insights. Thank you. Before we say goodbye, could you share with our listeners how they can learn more about your work and more about your app?
Yeah. So we have a website, beceremonial.com, that kind of takes you through a lot of what we're doing. We've launched an amazing platform right now for employers and organizations that they can create wellness plans for their employees. So if you are a business owner and you want to support your staff, your volunteers, maybe somebody in your team is going through infertility or has just lost a parent or is going through a divorce, giving them access to Be Ceremonial is such an amazing gift because it shows them that those moments are valued. It helps them validate their grief and what they're feeling. You can find our app in any app store. It's free to download. You can set up an account for free. We try to offer a lot within the app that is free, and then the rest is through a membership wall. So you can become a monthly or yearly member. It's really accessible. I think in the US it's $52 a year or $10 a month. So we're really trying to remove the barriers of cost and make this available to people so that they feel permission to get curious and ask questions and explore and fumble and make mistakes and get up from those and learn again. So that's the big part of our vision. And I also host monthly free gatherings online. So you can find out more on our website and come and join me. Next month, we're going to be talking about mother loss and mother grief in connection to Mother's Day. So
Folks, it's been a journey today, one that has taken us through the heart of what it means to connect, heal, and celebrate life through rituals. Megan has opened a door for us into a world where the sacred and the everyday meet, and I hope that you feel inspired and you want to explore what rituals can mean in your own life. Remember, it's about making space for what truly matters, honoring our connections, and moving through the world with intention. Thank you for joining us. If you have any questions, please comment below or reach out to me directly. And if you found this conversation to be helpful, please like, share, comment, and subscribe. This is Traci Arieli from Comforting Closure, wishing you peace and comfort in your journey. Until next time, take care.